Again, welcome to today's webinar. And the title is Surge Ahead with Artificial Intelligence, 5 Strategies for Business Success. And our presenter this evening is Margaret Eastwood, who's a certified SCORE mentor with the North Cook and Lake Counties chapter of SCORE. My name's John Fisher, and I'm one of over 60 mentors with our SCORE chapter. I'm going to be the moderator for today. And as a reminder, the session is being recorded and is going to be made available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days here. So please submit your questions using the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen at any time. We will welcome all questions, but they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Margaret has a lot of stuff to cover, and so we will get those at the end here. So SCORE is a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. We provide free confidential mentoring for small businesses, and our website, which is on the next page, thank you, has a lot of very good resources for those who want to start a business or grow an existing business. And also we'll give you information about our upcoming webinars. So to request a mentor, which is free and confidential for everyone, just go to our website, northchicago.score.org. Or if you have your phone handy, you can click on take a picture of the QR code, and it'll take you to the place where you can sign up for a mentor here. So before we start the actual presentation here, I want to do a short poll. And so the poll here has 3 questions. One is, what stage of business are you currently in? And we have 3 choices there. Thinking about it, been in business for 1 to 5 years, and been in business for over 5 years. And then the next question is, if you have a business, how many employees do you have? So it's just me, 2 to 10, 11 to 100, or over 100. And then the third question is, what's your level of experience with AI? First response is no experience, just looking to learn. The second is starting to look at AI. And the third is relatively experienced with AI. So we'll let that run a little bit. It now says that we have about 48% of those who are in the webinar participating in the poll. We have right now the 64% of you have been in business for over 5 years, and so 22% are thinking about starting a business. And in terms of number of employees, we have 63% who are just me, 29% 2 to 10, and 8% 11 to 100. And then experience with AI, and I'll publish this in just a second, but we want to get people to participate here, is 38% have no experience and are just looking to learn about artificial intelligence. 52% are just starting to look at AI, and 7% are relatively experienced here. So let me share the results here with you. Hopefully that will show up on your screen. And so that's today's audience that we have for the presentation. So let me introduce Margaret here. So as I said, Margaret is a certified SCORE mentor, and she uses her expertise in AI, conversion rate optimization, and search engine optimization to help SCORE clients move their business forward. She's held top executive positions in several large companies and also co-founded 2 startups. Margaret retired as a vice president in Johnson & Johnson's medical devices business, and she holds a PhD in computer science. So Margaret, I'm going to take the poll down, and then you can start your presentation and we will take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This would be fine if I could get the slides to go. There we go. Harvard Business Review made a prediction that AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. Only time will tell if their prediction is correct, but I'm going to make one of my own. And that is that businesses with AI will outcompete businesses without AI. And I feel very confident making that prediction because AI is really powerful. It's extremely fast, astonishingly fast, in fact, because things that might have taken you hours before can now be done in just minutes. And it's like adding a virtual staff of extremely smart people because there's so much expertise and knowledge embedded in all the AI systems. You can save money if you decide to do some things in-house that you used to outsource. Now, the term artificial intelligence actually covers a whole ocean of technologies. 20 years ago, it only applied to a computer that beat humans at chess. But since that time, the technology has evolved to cover robots, image recognition, Siri and Alexa, autonomous vehicles, and now ChatGPT. When I talk about AI during this presentation, I'm only going to be referring to the most recent wave, which is generative AI and based on large language models. Now, large language model just means it's really good with words. Generative means it makes up its own answers in a form that hasn't been seen before. Now, I'm not going to talk about generating computer code, but I am going to talk about the other two branches. There are thousands of AI programs already, and I've grouped them in broad 3 categories. The first one at the bottom is called foundation, and that's because they are frequently the foundation for ones higher up on this chart. And the whole thing started with ChatGPT when it was announced in November of 2022. It was an instant worldwide hit, fastest growing software ever. And of course, everyone wanted to jump on that bandwagon, including Microsoft, who jumped in with Bing, Google, who jumped in with Bard. DALL-E and Midjourney are both image generations, and there are now actually many in that particular foundation category. But the bandwagon effect of the popularity of ChatGPT spawned the second layer that you see here with all the plugins and extensions. The last time I looked, there were over 1,000 extensions that are all made to go with ChatGPT. They add extra features that are not part of the standard product. There are also in that category lots of other special purpose AI packages that do very interesting things that you might be interested in at some point. But the top band is what you're going to see a lot of. About the spring of 2023, all the major software companies that have been in business for years, names that you're going to recognize like LinkedIn, Zoom, Constant Contact, QuickBooks, all of them started adding AI assistants, or maybe they called it your AI companion, your AI co-pilot. They all now have AI incorporated right into their standard packages. So there's a lot of them out there, but if you don't happen to see one in your favorite piece of software, don't worry, I'm sure it's coming because there are new announcements literally daily about new entrants to the field or features that have been introduced. So I'm sure it's coming. You're going to say, well, how in the world are you going to find all these things? Well, the GPT plugin store is on the OpenAI website, but you do have to have at least the low-cost paid version to reach them. There are over 1,000 of them. For all the other tools, which are not part of either a standard software package like LinkedIn or part of GPT extensions, you will find in a number of websites, such as the ones I have listed here, that try to keep track of them. And most of them have filters like you see, so you can find what you want. This is the format that I'm going to be using this evening. You have to remember that all those fabulous tools are available not only to you, but also to your competitors. So if you want your company to surge ahead, or even keep up with the crowd. You're going to need to really learn how to get the most value out of your AI activities. And that's what we're going to try to show you today. Now, this sequence I'm going to repeat 5 times, once for each of the 5 strategies. There will be a list of AI use cases. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just to get you started thinking about it. I will pick one out of that list to use as an example, but then I have to tell you that there'll be some cautions and concerns with each of them. AI is still very new, and so it has growing pains. You need to be aware of the pitfalls so that you can deal with them appropriately when they happen. Now, these 5 strategies are all very effective, but they're also very practical and realistic. You can do any of them tomorrow. The same thing is true of the AI use cases. I've only selected ones that you can do with what I'm going to refer to as vanilla AI. Different packages have different extra features. Some are more advanced than others. I've tried to limit this to all my examples being something you could do with any of the different AI packages. I happen to have done them with GPT-4. Some are done in ChatGPT. A couple of them are done in Bard. It doesn't really matter, but I do like GPT-4. But you'll see some, and you should be able to do them tomorrow. All right. Before I actually start in on this sequence, I do want to give you a quick tutorial on prompt engineering. Now, a prompt is how you tell AI what you want it to do. And you're really having a two-way conversation with AI. And it will remember what you're talking about in that conversation until you tell it that you're changing topics. This is an extremely useful capability that it has. And the reason we're spending any time talking about this at all is that the better the prompt, the more useful will be the result. If you give it just a generic prompt, you'll get a generic answer, lots of words, but not much substance, at which point you'll get very frustrated with it and say, what's all the big deal about AI? I can't use any of this in a productive way. So you want to have good prompts, but it's not hard. But your question is, what is the definition of a good prompt? And the best way to know is just to ask GPT to give us one. For all of the examples I'm going to be using, the prompts that I've typed out here are verbatim what I put into the computer, bad grammar and bad spelling and all. Then for all the output from the AI system, I've taken screenshots. So there's no editing that's been done on either the prompt or the results. I want you to really see what happens if you're out there using it. So here's my first prompt. To get the best GPT results, I need good prompts. List 7 attributes of a good GPT prompt. List them as bullet points. Follow each one with a one-line prompt that might be used by a small business that is an example of that attribute. And this is a screenshot of the output we got. This is actually an excellent list, one of the best I've seen. I would encourage you to actually write these down, or maybe even take a picture of it if you have it for future reference. Clarity means that your prompt is very clear, it's not ambiguous. Specificity is what exactly do you want AI to do for you? Structure refers to the format. How do you want it arranged? Engagement is its tone of voice. Do you want it to be business-like? Do you want it to be funny, happy, sad? Relevance is, what are we talking about? It's sort of similar to context. Conciseness is, do you want a short answer or a long answer? Those are the 7 that GPT gave us, but I added an 8th one of my own. Sometimes it's also useful to tell AI what you don't want as well as what you do. So this is what we're going to be using as a guideline for a good prompt. So let's put me to the test and look at that prompt one more time. The part I have in green there is the context. I need to get the best GPT results so that I can get, to get the best GPT results, I need good prompts. That's our context. The specificity, what do I really want it to do, is list 7 attributes of a good prompt. The structure, namely the format, is list them as bullet points, follow each one with a one-line prompt. And the relevance is, I want it to be used by a small business. So this is indeed a good prompt. All right, we're ready to move on to our first strategy. Apply AI across your entire business, not just to marketing. Now, using AI for marketing has gotten a lot of press, and with good reason. It has a lot of uses there, and we will talk about those in a few minutes. But if AI is as great as everybody says it is, then why wouldn't you want to use it across your entire business? So I have here a generic org chart. This is an org chart of your company, and it has all the standard functions. And I just hear you saying, wait, no, I have a small little company. I don't have all that stuff. Ah, but you do. You may not have any live people who are dedicated to each of these topics, but you still have tasks to do in each of these areas. And if you don't have staff, it means you're trying to do it all yourself. And if you're all stressed out and never have enough time to get to all the things that you want to do for your company, then all the more reason why you need AI to help you. And so what we're going to do is do use cases for each of these functions you see in the org chart. We'll start with finance, and we'll just work our way across the org chart and end with marketing. So let's go to the first one, which is finance. Now, this is a list of AI use cases that I think you can do starting tomorrow. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just ones that fit on a slide. And the first one I want to mention is it can add to your finance knowledge. It turns out it's quite common for entrepreneurs to have an excellent understanding of whatever their business is, but have never had financial training. So, for example, if you're a great physical therapist, but you didn't really follow the whole conversation when your bookkeeping service was going on and on about cash accounting versus accrual accounting, just ask your AI and say, you want an example that goes along with a physical therapist business. And within seconds, you will have an answer. So it's a very useful tool. But there are all these other things you can do too. It can help with finance planning, estimating your costs, writing payment reminder emails. If you're still looking for funding, it might help you research for the sources or help draft a grant application. Thank you letters to your donors or to your angel investors, quarterly updates. And if you are working on your business plan, by the way, SCORE has fantastic templates and information about business plans, but you are still the one who has to write the sections. And sometimes AI can help you with that and your elevator speech. Now, out of this list, the one we're going to use as an example right now is help with finance planning. So here is the prompt. I want to open a bakery shop that sells 10 kinds of pastries. That's a context. It is for takeout only. What will be my primary categories of expenses? And what are the main expense items in each category? Include both one-time and ongoing expenses. This is a screenshot of the results. It did exactly what the prompt asked. Over on the left, you can see the major categories, both one-time at the top and then ongoing below. And on the right, you can see that each one of them is further explained with examples. And so this might be useful to you as sort of a checklist. Before you get to the make a budget stage, you have some idea of what will need to be included. So this can be very useful. So that's our first example of using the prompt and getting a result. But those AI waters are treacherous. Something can come up and bite you. And the main one is that the answer could be wrong. Sometimes it's just incomplete. Sometimes it's flat out wrong. Even worse is when it makes up an imaginary answer. It invents things that don't really exist. And lastly, it's been well established now that because the training data for all these AI models had a lot of bias in it from the raw material, that your answer could also be biased. So even though these packages are all getting much, much better, you still have to do manual fact checking, still strongly recommended. All right, let's go on to our second strategy. Make AI as convenient as your cell phone. I bet you didn't expect that as a strategy, did you? If you're like most of us, you use your cell phone every day and consider it an indispensable tool. What would it take for you to use AI every day and consider it an indispensable tool? So I did a rough comparison between cell phones and AI. Both of them are very versatile. They can do all sorts of stuff. They're both user-friendly. But a big difference is how organized they are, how well they deal with large amounts of data. For example, with your cell phone, you've got all your contacts, you've got thousands of photos, you have your playlist, and it's very good at having a way for you to add data, delete things, find things. Unfortunately, AI in general is not that mature yet. And so there's a shortcoming there, that if you're really going to use this as a daily tool, or at least a very frequent tool within your business, we have to fill this void. And in just a minute, I'm going to show you a suggestion for how to do that. But first, we're going to do, again, use cases. We've already did finance, which was our leftmost function on our work chart. We're going to move on to legal. Now, you may run into lots of different kinds of contracts. Not only can you have it help you draft contracts, it can actually review contracts that you receive and give you a heads up if it sees any problems there. But there are lots of other things that are legal, or at least quasi-legal. Your cancellation policies, non-disclosure agreements, IP ownership statements, terms and conditions, privacy statements. And especially for those of you who are just getting started with your companies, it can be a real help to find out what are the licensing requirements for your business and your geographic location, and also other laws that might apply to you, like zoning or signage or things like that. So there are plenty of opportunities to have it be useful. The one I'm going to choose out of this list for our example is a customer contract. Here is our prompt. My company sprays people's yards for mosquitoes. They can select either a weekly or bi-weekly schedule. They can pay by the month or for the entire season. I need a contract for the customer to sign that shows which options he has selected, and he agrees to pay the specified rate. Write a customer contract. Voila, in seconds, here it is. Beautifully formatted, I might say. I did laugh, however, when I saw all the terms and conditions it managed to find, which are on the right-hand side of the screen. But let me blow this up so you can actually read it, because I was very impressed with the format that it picked, with these little boxes that my customer could check off of which option they wanted, because our prompt did not specify format. It's just that this AI package, this would happen to be GPT, was smart enough to come up with one that I thought was really nice. So here we have our customer contract. Once again, there is a concern. I already alerted you that the answers from AI might be wrong. They might make mistakes. Therefore, please refer to a real lawyer to get guidance before you do your final versions. AI is not a substitute for real, honest-to-goodness legal documents. It just gets you started. All right, where are we headed next? This is something that you really need to use. Remember that our strategy was, how do you make it as useful as your cell phone? And I told you it is not good with handling data in or out. You're going to want to keep track of all the prompts that you've discovered work really well for your business. And I have not been able to find a commercial prompt library that meets my needs. So I invented my own, and I'm going to share it with you. You can certainly invent your own if you like. But this one is very low tech. All I do is copy the prompt out of my GPT or my AI, and I paste it into a spreadsheet. I like a spreadsheet better than a document because it's easier to sort, and there are reasons why I might want to do that. But I just copy them in there, number them sequentially, and I have a way to store the prompts that I have found useful for my business. But this is just storing them. We'll talk about retrieving and reusing them in a few minutes. So hold that thought. Very low tech, but essential. You're going to need this. You'll lose track if you just assume you can find them in your AI history. All right, let's move on to the third strategy. Use prompt chains for speed, quality, and efficiency. This is really where the gold is buried in AI. If you use prompt chains, it makes a good system even better. The quality of the results is better. Because it's more efficient, the overall speed is even faster than it would have been otherwise. But the obvious question is, what in the world is a prompt chain? A prompt chain is a series of prompts that execute in a particular order. Each one does part of the job and passes on its results for use by prompts further down the line. Okay, so we're going to make one of these in a few minutes. So it takes multiple prompts to get the job done, and they use results from previous prompts. So that's what you need to remember, please. All right, but first, again, we will look at a list of example AI use cases, and these are all about human resources. That's where we are in our org chart. The most obvious is job descriptions. You know what they are, but you also might want to be looking for where is the most likely place I can find such a person. Job postings, you want to know how much is this going to cost? What about writing offer letters or benefit descriptions? If you have any remote employees, onboarding company cultural materials are really useful so they get a sense of what is your company like. Even if you only have one person, you should have, not for yourself, I mean one other person besides you, you should have a policy manual. You want that stuff in writing for a lot of reasons. If things are going well, team building ideas, non-monetary reward suggestions. If things aren't going quite so well, maybe you would like to ask a little advice on what you might be able to do about it. So for this example that we're going to do for human resources, we're going to do a job description and we're going to do a prompt chain. Okay, here is our prompt for our job description. I want to hire a contractor to do social media postings for my small company. Duties will be to prepare the content and post on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram every week. Contractor will also respond to any comments. The work can be done remotely, take 3 hours a day, write a job description for this position. Again, within seconds, beautifully formatted, works just fine. And you say, wow, this is terrific. 3 minutes flat and I'm done. Well, if you've ever actually tried to hire someone, or if you've ever been a job candidate yourself, you know there's a lot more to it than just a job description. So in this scenario, we're going to assume that you want to advertise for your contractor on Indeed or any job board. But Indeed wants a job posting, not a job description. All right, so we're going to start our prompt chain. There are going to be 7 prompts all in a row that help solve our problems. And in this case, all the prompts are verbatim in yellow and a screenshot of the results are listed underneath it. So our first question is, what's the difference between a job description and a job posting? And the answer is the job posting has to sell the job, so someone will want to apply for it. So the next prompt in our prompt chain is, well, how much am I going to have to actually pay this person? The answer is, well, it depends on their experience, but here are some ballpark numbers. Our next prompt in our prompt chain is, well, I don't think I can just rely on money to attract someone because it's such a tight job market. What might motivate such a person to consider my company? The answers are flexibility, them having a chance at a creative expression, and they would like professional development. These are things that might motivate them besides money. Well, I certainly want to make sure I get my money's worth, however, so what should I be looking for as attributes in the candidate to make sure that they're likely to do a good job for my company? And the answer is creativity, which is kind of a given, but adaptability came as a surprise to me. And it explains why adaptability is something that we might look for in a candidate. The next next prompt in my prompt chain is suggest 3 interview questions to use when I'm interviewing these candidates. And this is where you really see one prompt using the results from a different prompt, because it's smart enough to realize, without my explicitly saying so, that what we want in the candidate is what we should ask for in the interview questions. So creativity turns out to be the first interview question. Adaptability turns out to be the second interview question. And then it added a third one with analytical skills. So you can see where the results of one got fed to the next. So after all of these, now are we ready to actually write our job posting? Again, instant answer, lovely format. We have all the different sections here. I'm going to blow it up so that you can see the fine print. Remember that the purpose of the job posting was to get somebody inspired to come and work for our company, that they would even apply. And so here again, you can see that the quality of our answer is better because we asked it through a prompt chain. It remembers what was in the answer to the third prompt, which is what might motivate this person. And without us even asking it to do this, it was smart enough to put in a section that says, why join us? And it promises those three things that we got as an answer from our prompt number 3. And this is actually prompt number 7 that we're looking at now. So that's how it passes along the answer to give you a good quality. Now you read this and I say it's lovely. It has all the right things in it. It reads well if you actually took the time to read all the words, but you look at it and you think, maybe it's a little dry. We want maybe what's a little better. So one of the things you can always do anytime you ask AI to write some content for you is to change the tone of voice. So I'm going to give it a different prompt and I'm going to say, I want it to be breezy, snappy, engaging, emphasize how much fun it is here. Well, boy, did it ever. It rewrote every single sentence in here. Let me blow it up so you can read it. Look what it has now for why should they join us. We're all ears for your groundbreaking ideas. Celebrate heartwarming tales of the satisfied customers that roll in thanks to your magic touch. Wave goodbye to the mundane and step into a world where work is play and every day is a creative gala. How could you resist applying to such a company? I couldn't believe it when I saw this. It even changed the name of the job title. It's now saying that what we're looking for is a social media maestro, someone who blends a passion for pixels with a dash of creativity while working in their PJs. All right, so maybe the prompt made it go a little bit overboard. Maybe that's not quite what you would really want in your job posting, but it certainly illustrates how the AI is very able to rewrite things in almost any style. You can give it an example style. You can word it a little more carefully in your prompt so you get the exact amount of what you want, but you can see how it does it. All right, we've just done a whole lot of prompts. You need to get into the habit of every time you make some more prompts that you store them in your prompt library. So here in this hypothetical case, we had already gotten up to prompt number 19. And so 19 through 25 are all those prompts that we just put in our prompt chain. Okay, nothing fancy here. You just copy them out, stick them in the spreadsheet. However, we want to be able to get them back out again to reuse. Maybe a month from now or even longer, we hope to go out and get a project manager or a finance person or something. So we're going to want to remember what prompts did we use and in what sequence to reuse them. So this is just another part of the same spreadsheet. And all it does is say, which prompts do we use for new hires? And it lists all of them. And being a spreadsheet, you can add as many columns as you need for all the prompts. And when you actually get to marketing, you'll find that marketing also has very, very long prompt chains. You're going to need a lot of columns to keep track of which sequence, in which sequence you should use them. Here's a hypothetical example. There's our C1, our chain number 1, and I had to chop off the right-hand end to fit it on the slide. But you can see that some prompts like P12 might appear in more than one chain. You might also discover that they're definitely not in a sequential order any longer because you're going to want to edit them to add new capabilities or erase something that didn't really work so well. In our new hire case, I might want to add yet another task, namely draft the offer letter. We left that one out. So I would add that to the prompt chain here. You can say that's all fine, you understand that, but why in the world is C4 for finance in this at all? It's not a chain, it's just a single prompt. Well, that's because of the column called frequency. And that's in there because of the following. Let's say it's approaching the end of the month. And so you can just sort this prompt chain library on the frequency column. And it will put together all the different tasks that have to be done at the month end. And then you can just clock right through them to get all the things that need to be done at the end of the month. Or you can sort it so all the Wednesdays show up and you have your whole to-do list all there for you. So that's how it can work. And you say, oh yeah, you get it. However, isn't this an awful lot of copying and pasting, going back and forth from the spreadsheet to the AI? It does not have to be. There's a better way. Okay, so here's what you do. You put GPT or whatever your AI is on your phone, and then you speak the prompts of the chain in the right sequence into your phone. And you can see what's happening. You can know whether or not you have to make a choice or add a parameter or something. You can watch it, but you just speak all your choices into your phone. You sit there with a big cup of coffee. By the time your cup of coffee is over, it's had time to sync the conversation that you had from your phone onto your computer, and you're all done. It's really quite painless. So that's what you can do to reuse items out of your prompt chain. Please remember to put them in your library if you ever use them. All right. Once again, there are concerns. We've been talking about human resources use cases. There are two big things that really apply there. The first is, please do not put personal or confidential information into any of the AI systems. I know they try to reassure you, but please don't do it. You can always put placeholder names and numbers in there. It applies also to finance and legal, obviously, that you don't want the confidential information, and then add the real stuff afterwards. The other thing that's especially worrisome with HR use cases is that the responses might be biased. And so you have to be on the lookout for that as well. All right, so where are we? We're now ready for sales in our organization chart. So I have some AI cases for that. The most obvious is your sales pitch and answers to any objections that a customer might have. You can do it in two ways. One, you could have it help write it, but you can also have it help you practice, either by acting as a prospective customer or critiquing your performance. You can speak your sales pitch into that GPT that you have on your phone that we just used a minute ago. But there are other things you can do too. You can prospect for leads, you can write customer proposals or follow-up emails, customer satisfaction surveys, and depending obviously on your business or service that you sell, you may or may not have user manuals, troubleshooting instructions, things like that. That will depend on your business. Out of this particular list, the one that we're going to do is prospect for leads. Here's our prompt. I want to sell specialty water bottles to gyms. Give me a list of gyms within 25 miles of Columbus, Ohio. Sort them by the size of the business. List them with the largest one first. Include the gym's name and address. Presto, instant answer. Here they are. I don't live in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm going to assume they're correct and that they are listed largest first. You might notice I put a little note here that I did this with Bard. Bard is owned by Google, and they have gone to the trouble of interfacing Bard to all of their Google products, Google Maps, Google Docs, Google Drive, all of those. So I thought, why not? They have a shorthand way to get into their own map equipment information. And I assume Bard then figured out which one was the biggest. So that's what I've done there for sales. All right, we're ready to move on to our fourth strategy, and that is to use AI to personalize your marketing. Before I go into a deep dive on personalization, let's look at the AI use case list, and we're all the way over at marketing, what you may have been waiting for. The obvious one that gets all the press is using it for social media posts. And I hope at this point you recognize what I have listed here as a long prompt chain. Here's your scenario. You have to do 2 posts next week and you've run out of ideas. You have no idea what you're going to write about. So the first prompt in your chain is, give me 5 ideas of topics that might be suitable for my post next week. It gives you the 5 ideas. You pick 2 that you like. So then you do your next prompt and you say, write the content to go with these 2 ideas. It does that. You like it, okay. Your next prompt is, suggest some captions to use with this. The next prompt is, suggest some hashtags and emojis for these 2 posts. Then you need images because it's a social media. So you ask it for ideas. Give me 3 ideas for each of these posts. What might I use for images? You make your choices. You then do the prompts. Okay, generate these images that go with the 2 posts, and you have your job done. By all means, plan on putting this into your prompt library, your prompt chain list, because it's one of those that you're likely to use very frequently. You will have a similar prompt chain, I predict, for other aspects of your digital marketing, whether it be emails, press releases. It'll even help you write paid ads. But those aren't the only things that AI is good for in marketing. Have you ever considered writing an ebook? What about buyer personas? What's trending in your industry? Competitor analysis, surveys, quizzes, language translation. It'll even give you ideas for new products or services. It'll suggest names for them. It'll even suggest a name for your company if you haven't started yet. So you can see why there's a lot of publicity about marketing, because it is a very big list. But right now, the one we're going to talk about is personalization. That's our strategy. You are probably already repurposing marketing content if you're doing anything on social media. By that, I mean you have some base content. It might be that you're announcing a new product or you have a big sale next week, and you put it everywhere. You put it in your newsletter, you put it on your website, you put it on Facebook. That's repurposing your marketing content. It's great. Keep doing it. It's a good thing. However, there's more. What we really want is personalized marketing, which means we have different customer segments get slightly different content modified specifically to appeal to them. And the reason we want to do that is that personalized marketing gets a much better conversion rate. Now, how much better depends on a lot of different factors, but it's always a big number. So you certainly want to do it, but it is a lot more work. Now that you have AI to help you, it makes it more doable for you to take this extra step. Here's what we're going to do. It turns out that very few companies actually have a good handle on what are their customer segments. They'll know their target market. They'll say, oh, people who own dogs, or, oh, people who like to cook, whatever it might be. But they don't actually know customer segments within that target market. So we're going to use AI to help figure that out. And then we're going to use AI to help modify the content for each of these segments, so it will be more appealing and personalized. The things that you see in yellow are actually, when you just do repurposing, you only have to do those 2, whereas when you're doing personalization, you do the ones also in blue. So let's look at it. Here is the prompt. I make unique, handcrafted women's jewelry. These are the materials I use. Here's my price range. Write some customer personas that would describe my customers. So the first thing to notice is that AI actually knew what a persona is. We didn't tell it in the prompt. Persona is a hypothetical person who represents a customer segment. And it has 3 of them here. It has Aria, who is between 30 and 40 and is artistic. We have Bella, who is a little bit younger, an environmentalist. And we have Catherine, a little older, who is an elegant professional. And if you actually look at this, you'll see that it has exactly what we need for each of these customer segments. It has their interests and their shopping motivation. We will use that information to then rewrite or modify our content to appeal to those things. What do they care about? That's the personalization that needs to be done. Now, this is an excellent start, but one thing that it doesn't tell us is which social media platform do they prefer. So if we look at that, just an easy prompt, we're going to use Instagram for Aria, Facebook for Bella, and LinkedIn for Catherine. So we're all set. The next thing would be a prompt that asks AI to generate those 3 versions of our base content, targeting each of these people. In the interest of time, I didn't do that, but we're going to move on to images because social media needs images. All right, here's the prompt. Create an image of Catherine. Remember that her interest was fine dining. Okay, that was I got to point that out, but it says she likes fine dining. So she is sitting in an elegant restaurant, holding a glass of wine. The candlelight glints off the rim of the wine glass and off her gold earrings. We sell earrings, so make sure they're prominent. No competing jewelry. Now, because I was using GPT, it is already connected to DALL-E, which is one of the leading image generators. This has great benefits, especially if you're a beginner. There are many other good image generation programs, but here it's so easy. You didn't even realize I was going to do anything because it's just a normal prompt. We don't have to call up anything. It just happens. Presto, there it is. You can see there it does alert me that it has switched over to Dolly without any effort on my part. And here are the 4 examples it gave me to choose from. The default is to do 4 of them. And I think that the first option there in the upper left is really lovely. I think we could use that one. I also very much liked number 3, except that what's that candle doing in the middle of her wine glass? The second choice is because our prompt did not specify what graphic style we wanted to use. And so it reminded us it can do a lot of different graphic styles, a lot of them actually. But let's assume that in this case, we like number 1. Now, to do this took us maybe 2 minutes. So I figured I might as well do Bella here. And this time, again, the persona said that she liked organic. And so I did not put in a long prompt. I just said she's at a farmer's market, and it apparently knows what a farmer's market looks like. So we could use choice number 1. I think that's quite nice. Choice number 3 would have been fine if for some reason we did not want photorealism. Choice number 4 has kind of a weird collarbone. I don't think I like that one. And number 2 is just plain awful. Those aren't even real words, which brings us to some of the concerns, things to look for when you're using AI generated images. You can get a complete shipwreck where all 4 of the choices are not really anything you could use, and you have to do several iterations. Another alert that you'll find out is that sometimes the editing has to be done elsewhere. For example, I would not attempt to get that candle out of that wine glass using Dolly. It always likes to start over, and I didn't want it to start over. So just be alert to that. Sometimes it'll surprise you. But another thing that really happens with AI generated images is that there's a lot of related challenges in the industry. Copyright laws are only one of them. Things like original ownership, inappropriate subjects, imitation, identities, bias. There are large groups of people who are trying to solve all these problems, but they have not yet. So just follow the news on some of these. At the moment, something done 100% by AI cannot be copyrighted, but that might change. All right, we're at our 5th strategy, and that is make your company stand out in the crowd. And there will be a crowd. Every company that has access to these tools will be able to generate a boatload of content, and all the social media channels will be just flooded with new data. In fact, all the digital marketing channels will be flooded with all the content that everybody can generate. So how are you going to stand out and be noticed? Now, number 5 is such a big topic that it deserves a webinar all of its own, which obviously we're not going to do today. We have actually talked about several things already which help solve this. The personalization of marketing is a big one, actually, that helps you get noticed. So are relevant hashtags, eye-catching images. Those are all helpful, and we have touched on them at least a little bit. So now I'm going to add one more aspect of making your company stand out, and that is your brand image. Now, maybe you already have a brand image. Maybe if you're just starting out, you don't yet. But here are 4 things that contribute to a brand image that you can do using AI easily. And they are shape. I'm sure you recognize those. Color, you probably recognize those too. Font and character. Rice Krispies has been putting Snap, Crackle, and Pop on their box for 75 years. It must be working for them. So maybe you could do something for you to do something similar. But we're first going to start with shape, because I thought those were really neat. So here is our prompt. McDonald's has its arches. Nike has its swoosh. They are eye-catching, but clean and simple. I would like a signature shape for my landscape company. Can you give me 3 suggestions for a design? All right, immediately, here's what it gave me. Notice I didn't have to do anything special. It transferred from GPT to Dolly all by itself. And I look at it and I think, well, if I lived in Colorado, I would pick number 2, but I don't live in Colorado, so I'm going to pick number 1, and I will have my own swoosh. Here's an example where AI will let you down. I wanted it in green instead of in black. Dolly would not do that. It kept wanting to start over. So because I happen to have a Mac, I just used Apple's photo editor that's on my computer for all my photos, and I could change the color from black to green. So just be alert to some of the things that don't work perfectly. All right, so that we don't need to belabor that. Let's say you didn't want a shape, maybe you wanted a character. So here I have specified what graphic style do we want. And it's a 3D color cartoon. And we want a fitness trainer who's smiling. But I don't say anything else about what the fitness trainer looks like. You could put in a description of yourself, and you would have shown up in a cartoon version of yourself. Wouldn't that have been fun? But here's that it gave me these 3 little examples, and I think they're pretty cute and eye-catching. It may or may not fit the personality of your company. All right, so you have now seen all 5 of the strategies. You've also seen a list of over 60 AI use cases. You've seen an enabler, namely your prompt library and your prompt chain library. I hope that this has convinced you that AI is a serious business tool. It's not a toy. It's not a passing fad. It's for real. I hope this has also given you the confidence to actually embrace AI as an ongoing part of your company operations, and that you start using it. So if you look at this, some of you have already used AI. I hope you got some new ideas out of our discussion. For those of you who are just starting, don't let things hold you back. You can start tomorrow. All you have to do is pick something from your to-do list and type in the prompt. Your competitors are doing it. So best wishes to all of you as you surge ahead and ride the AI wave to business success. Thank you very much.
Peggy, thanks. Sorry, Margaret, thank you very much for that presentation. It was absolutely fascinating. And we've got several questions here. The first one is, should I buy a package of already prepared prompts?
All right, you will certainly see them for sale. You'll see some for free, and a lot of them they're trying to make money. I would say at this point, no, you don't need them. And here's why. The packages themselves have gotten much smarter. And so you saw many examples here just now where the prompt said almost nothing about format, and yet it came out beautifully. Once upon a time, you would have had to specify all that kind of stuff. You don't need to do that anymore. The other thing is that the capabilities of AI keep changing. They keep getting better and better, and those prompts get out of date. So, and the third reason I'm not a fan of the prepackaged ones, if you will, is that they're too generic. And for really the best use, you need something very specific to your business, your needs, and you would end up editing those anyway. So I don't happen to be a fan of them. It might give you some ideas, but I think you're better off on your own.
Okay, good. And you know, the whole prompt library thing that you created, I thought was amazing. And it was basically a simple spreadsheet that had all of your prompts. So it's an excellent idea and a good practice to document your work here. So next question is, how can we hire AI services and not AI specialists?
AI services rather than specialists. If you say that you just as now you can hire a contractor, I mean, that's a real use case. You can hire a contractor who will do posting for you every week. Mm-hmm. You can certainly hire people who will claim that they will use AI for you, if that's what the question meant. I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. There are people who are already setting up to be in business as your AI consultant, if you will, who will train you more about it, or you can come to SCORE and we will help you with it. That's a little plug. So I don't, John, do you think I answered the question? I'm not sure I know what it was.
Yeah, I believe so. It was a little unclear to me, but I think I think, one of the things that I always look for in these is you can buy a tool, but people really want a solution. The generative AI tools actually can give you both. Depends on, again, how you ask them, but I believe you did answer it here. So this is the next question is, what's the difference between generative AI and generative adversarial networks?
Oh, that's really interesting. The generative adversarial networks is one of the ways that the AI packages, some of them get better and better. You may have remember the news stories when AI learned how to play the game Go, which is a Oriental ancient game, but very difficult. And the way they trained AI to do that is they set up two packages who talk to each other, and they played against each other millions of times until by trial and error, they figured out what worked. So those are adversarial networks. They train themselves by these massive numbers of trial and error until they found out what works. It's how they taught robots to go out and play soccer. They let it just try hitting things. And after playing a million games of soccer, the robots, digitally, so to speak, it figured out how to do this. So that's what the adversarial networks are.
Wow, that's that's amazing. So you're basically pitting two teams against each other.
Yes.
In terms of doing this. So next question is, where do you download the AI to use?
Oh, in case of Chat GPT and GPT, they are on the company that does those is called open.ai. It's OpenAI. Yeah, I don't know exactly if it's .com. I guess it must be. But anyway, OpenAI does that, and you can download it from there. Bard, I don't remember even downloading anything. I think I just typed it in and ran it on my computer. And so once you're in Bard, I suppose you can download it onto your phone. Certainly from the website on OpenAI is where I downloaded GPT to my phone. And I have not really done much with Bing because I'm not a Microsoft user. So I can't answer that part.
And I just read today that Amazon is actually coming out with a new tool called, I think, Olympia or something like that. So pretty soon they'll be everywhere at your local supermarket as well.
Well, all of those big companies, as I say, everybody from LinkedIn to Word and PowerPoint are all going to have AI in them. So there you don't download anything. You just use the package as you always did.
Yeah, with Constant Contact, I know they have a new thing where it'll generate have an AI generated marketing piece for you here. So here's a more practical question. What's the price of ChatGPT with Dolly?
All right. The package, they change the pricing almost every month. Let's say that first. Right this minute, I paid $20 a month for GPT-4. And that includes Dolly. It includes those 1,000 extensions. It includes just all sorts of stuff. And it's $20 a month. Now, your time is probably worth more than $20 an hour. So I consider this the biggest bargain ever and well worth every penny. It also gives me early access to every one of their new frills and whistles. I mean, it's just astonishing how many new things that they're coming out with. And so, as I say, that one is only $20 a month at the present time.
A lot cheaper than hiring free. Cheaper than hiring an assistant, you said.
Oh, yeah.
So there seem to be multiple AI interfaces. Is there a reliable source to differentiate between them?
I don't know what you mean by interfaces. Certainly, if I showed you, it hadn't told you which one was Bard and which one was GPT, you would not have known that the prompt was for any difference. Bing is actually run by GPT. When I say it's a foundation, it's sort of like the old Intel Inside ads. Remember those when Intel was inside the PCs? Well, you will find GPT is inside a whole lot of those others. It's inside of the Constant Contact, for example. It's inside Bing. So I don't know quite what you mean about the interfaces.
Yeah, I think they meant the different versions because a lot of people, I know myself, it's like, well, Bard uses Chat GPT and this uses Chat GPT and something else. So I think you answered it correctly there. I might add, or I guess I can ask, would it be reasonable to ask Chat GPT to give a chart of the various versions of generative AI tools and their benefits and advantages?
I would not recommend that. It literally, it changes every day. And there's a category that I alluded to on my chart, but did not explain totally. There is an even bigger industry, which is tools for companies to build their own AI from scratch. I mean, not from scratch, using these tools, all these computer programs that are being used. And that's what Amazon is actually doing with Olympus. If you use Amazon's cloud service, or you use Microsoft's cloud service, Azure, it will come with all these computer programs that let you write your own custom chatbot, your equivalent of Chat GPT. It'll let you write your own everything. And the big companies, a lot of them are using that. They're starting with these foundation tools. Where was I going with this? Anyway, so if you were going to write one from scratch, that's a whole industry is selling all those computer programs.
Yeah, it's a complicated market, as you said. The thing changes daily. So here's a question, and basically, where do we get AI for a startup business? And I don't know if there's a difference between a startup business and an already established business, but Margaret?
All right. Okay, this will be our last question, I think, because I think we're actually out of time or close to it. If you're just starting, I would strongly recommend that you start with either Chat GPT or GPT for 20 bucks. All right. It's so easy to use and it's so capable that I find it the best mix of convenience, ease of use, zero learning curve. You saw what a prompt looks like. It's not rocket science. You just have to have some good ideas to start typing.
Yeah, and you're right, Margaret. We are running out of time here, and in the to respect everyone's time, let's do the last. Here you go. So thank you again for this presentation. It's absolutely amazing. And if you want a SCORE mentor who can potentially help you with your business, with business planning, with all of those sorts of things, then go to our website at score.org/North Chicago, and there's a request a mentor button, or you can point your phone at our QR code here. And again, thanks everyone for participating. This has been, just fascinating in terms of how to do this. And Margaret, I think your organization skills, I think, were very good in terms of laying this stuff out in a way that is very understandable. So thank you very much. And we will see everyone next. We do have some additional webinars, but those are not until February. So we're not going to do a list of those, but please stay tuned for additional webinars as we progress through the year here. So thank you very much.